All right, welcome everyone. Here we're hosting Elias Ilin, who's at the Atlanta Fed. He's an assistant policy advisor and economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, also associate director for the Advancing Careers Project. And Elias is with us today to share his work on the Policy Rules database. Elias, welcome.
Right, thanks for the introduction and thanks for joining. Yes, I'm here today to present you the Atlanta Fed Policy Rules database. So I have some slides to present you, and then I will also demonstrate you the product itself. All right, let me share my screen. All right, you should see slides on the screen. And if you'll have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to interrupt me. Otherwise, we'll have some discussion after I will end my presentation. All right, so let's get started. So first of all, what is the Policy Rules database, right? So Policy Rules database, or the PRD for short, is a fully open source repository with information on rules and provisions for all major and also some of the minor public assistance programs and tax credits, right? So these rules and provisions, they are at the federal level, state level, and also when applicable, even at the county level, right? So PRD also has historical rules that go back to 2011 for all programs. And then for some programs like the federal child tax credit, we track the rules all the way to the origination of the program, right? In the case of federal child tax credit, it was 1998, for example. The database is properly maintained by the Atlanta Fed, and we update the database annually according to a set schedule, right? So a set schedule, depending on the program, when the new rules come out, right? We use a schedule to update the policy rules database. And also if there is some important bill or some important policy change comes out, right? Then we update the database immediately to make sure that, all the relevant provisions are included in the database. Now, as I said, PRD is fully open source. We consider it public good, right? So anyone can access the database at no cost through the GitHub repository, and people also can contribute to the database, to the development of the database. And the PRD was built in a collaboration with NCCP, it's National Center for Children in Poverty. So they are our main partner on this project. All right. So here is the full list of programs included in the Policy Rules database, right? So on the tax side, PRD has personal income tax, sales tax, payroll taxes, and also all major tax credits at the federal and state levels. PRD also includes rules for all major public assistance programs, and some of the programs are still work in progress. So for example, LIHEAP, which is an energy assistance program, we are still working on including the LIHEAP into the database. And then some of the most, I would say, some of the most recent additions to the PRD are SSI, Supplemental Security Income, and SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. And these programs were added to the database as a part of an expansion of the PRD to cover population of people with disabilities. We also have our 2022-2023 development plans that include expanding PRD to some new populations. I think we are planning to include rules for veterans, special rules for people that are experiencing homelessness, and people who aged out of the foster care, right? So the PRD is always in development. We always trying to cover new populations, include some special rules and some additional programs as well. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about the structure of the PRD in more details. So the PRD consists of three main parts, right? So first, for each program listed in the previous table, right, the PRD provides Excel file with program parameters that are necessary to estimate the family's eligibility for the program, and also the dollar value of the benefit, right? So we have this Excel file with all the parameters. Then we have the R code, right? The PRD provides this R code that uses parameters from the Excel files to actually estimate the eligibility and the dollar value of the benefits, right, for any given family, right? So the Excel files just have parameters, and then this R code produces actual calculations to determine the eligibility, right? And then finally, we have the technical manual, right? PRD includes this technical manual, which is essentially a PDF file that describes how the program works and also outlines step-by-step instructions for how to use the policy rules database to implement the calculation. So it's like a technical manual, literally technical manual file with instructions. Now, when you go to the GitHub repository, GitHub doesn't just contain like collection of Excel files and pieces of the R code, right? It also has a ready-to-use sort of full PRD implementation, right? It contains this high-level file that reads in user-specified inputs and produces calculations for all programs. So you can think about that as sort of like a user interface, right? All you need to do is to specify the family composition, run the R code, and the program will return you the output file. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you in a minute, right? But so that's what GitHub repository includes, right? All the individual files, Excel files, R functions, technical manual, and then also sort of one program that kind of combines everything together that you can already use if you want to, right? Or you can just take the pieces and use pieces together, different ways, and you can modify each component of the PRD as well, right? All right. So before I'll go into the demonstration, I want to sort of use a relatively simple example, the federal child tax credit, to show you exactly what the PRD includes. So as you remember, the first piece of the PRD is an Excel spreadsheet with policy parameters. So if I go to PRD, open the Excel file, I will see the following parameters that are necessary to determine the eligibility for the family for the tax credit and also to estimate the value of the tax credit, right? So what income counts towards eligibility, for example, right? This is a countable income field. What are the age limits? What are the income limits for the program? How does the credit phase out? What portion of the credit is refundable, right? What is the dollar value of the credit? So all of these parameters are specified in the Excel PRD file, right? So you can, if you're just interested in knowing what is the countable income, for example, open Excel file and you can easily sort of retrieve this piece of information from the Excel file, right? Now, the next piece of the PRD is the R code, right? That actually produces the calculation. So that's just a screenshot, right? So the code takes certain information about the family as an input, then reads in the parameters from the Excel file, and then produces the actual calculation step by step, right? Or even steps that we need to implement to produce the calculations using the parameters from the Excel file. And again, just to emphasize, right? So this is an implementation that, chosen by us and written by us, right? You are free to use this implementation written in R, or if you're not comfortable with R as a programming language, right? You can rewrite this function in any other language, right? Using the same parameters from the Excel file. And then finally, right, so we have Excel file, have R code, and then finally, here is the piece of the PRD technical manual that describes how the federal child tax credit works. That essentially provides a high-level overview of the program, describes how the eligibility is determined, how the value of the benefit is determined. And this is just the first page, right? The technical manual also describes programming steps in sort of like a neutral language, right? Just really step-by-step instructions how to implement the program. All right. So now what I want to do next is to spend maybe 5-7 minutes walking you through the GitHub repository, right? Just to sort of show how everything, how we put everything together and how this thing works, right? And also, I think, let me see here. Here's the link I'll put in the chat, the link to the GitHub repository, if you want to sort of take a look yourself. But now I'm gonna stop sharing this screen, share another screen. Should be it. Do you see the GitHub repository right now? Yeah, perfect. All right. So this is the GitHub repository. I put a link in the chat. It has all the parts, all the PRD parts that I just described, right? So it has Excel files with policy parameters for each program, right? I have all the programs listed in the table, right? Childcare subsidies, different tax credits, Medicaid, all the stuff, right? Excel files. Now, it also has the R functions that produce the calculations for each of the program, right? And the repository also includes the technical manual. That's sort of the third component, right, that I outlined in my presentation, right? Full technical manual, a lot of, hundreds of pages. You can, if you're interested in a specific program, you can read information about the specific program. Now, finally, the folder contains this high-level R file called Apply Benefits Calculator R file, which is again a high-level program that aggregates all functions and runs the full PRD to produce the result, right? So with this one file in hand, you can just use the PRD right away, right? Don't even need to sort of do anything else, right? First, you can download the folder, right, into your local machine. If you have R installed, right? Then you can go to this project folder and specify sort of the family characteristics that you are interested in. That will be a set of inputs that you specify about the family. What is the rule year, current rule year, for example, age of each family member, disability status of each family member, and some other inputs like location, for example, and different income levels. So once you specify that, the program will know that that will be the family characteristics you're interested in. And then after doing that, the third step for you would be to run this the high-level apply benefits calculator file. Once you run that, it knows to take the proper inputs, right, from this YAML file, do all the settings, and then just run the benefits calculator block by block. Once you do that, once you run the whole file, the policy rules database will produce the output that you can explore in the output folder. That is essentially a CSV file with the output, right? What output includes the estimated value of the benefit, right? Depending on characteristics they specified in the YAML file, they'll provide you the estimates of each benefit for the family chosen by you, right? So that would be the file that you can use, in your research, or well, however you want to use that. So that also an overview of the policy rules database GitHub repository. I think I want to stop here for a second to see if you have any questions about the repository before I'll move on to the next part of my presentation.
Do you include any information on inflation adjustments, like kind of you looked at the child tax credit example? Do you include information on which parameters are inflation adjusted?
Like going forward, you mean?
Going forward, and then which inflation rate is used for the adjustment?
We literally were talking about that last Friday. No, we don't include it yet, but I think it's going to be important to do. Because different programs have different way to adjust it. Like food stamps, for example, have like very specific inflation component they're using, like the inflation of like the food, like 9.5%. So it's a very good point. I think we'll think about including that. Yeah, but not now.
And then you could have projections for future years.
Correct. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Right. Any other questions?
And I guess building on that, so what year are they all the same year at this point, or?
Yeah, right now it's the most recent 2022.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, correct. But if, for example, we want to project something into the future, then that will be important to include some of the more precise inflation adjustment. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But you mentioned that you have the historical data of these parameters as well. Is that how much historical work have you done in taking these policies backward? I mean, you've got state, federal, tax benefit. That's a huge amount of stuff to do, both the current policy and the history. And I'm
Yeah,
curious
I
how much
mean,
history you have.
right. So we do have well, first of all, have all the federal poverty levels, state median incomes back to 2000s, right? 2011, I think. Then we have all the Affordable Care Act rules since 2014, right? Medicare rules that go back to 2011. Then we have federal child tax credit since 1998. Same as federal EATC, it goes back to 2011, I think, as well. Section 8 housing voucher, like SMIs and the fair market rents, they go back to 2010, I think. So I guess income tax goes back to it was pre-CTCJ. So it'll be like around 2015. I need to check that. I don't remember exactly. We did a lot of historical work. Yeah. Because like I'm going to discuss it actually in a second, but outside of like the modeling, the current policy changes, we also were doing sort of like some research papers that like we essentially using these policy shocks as an instrument to do some of the analysis. So we had to like go back to history to get these policy changes. I'm going to talk about them in a second, actually. Right. Okay. So let me come back to my slides. Since I still have a little bit of time left, let me, all right, again, screen. There you go. Back to my slides. All right. So yeah, I want to go back to my slides and talk a little bit about the application of the PRD. Actually, I kind of started to talk about, the research application of it, but let me sort of elaborate on that. So there are many different applications for the PRD, right? And I think that I would say that the most important one for my project at Atlanta Fed right now is the benefits cliffs calculators, right? So different tools that sort of estimate the benefit cliffs, right? And effective marginal tax rates for households and for the families, right? So PRD right now is at the back end of multiple benefits cliffs tools. So we at Atlanta Fed, right, we have the collection of tools, right, the suite of Atlanta Fed cliff tools. And all of these tools use policy rules databases, R code at the back end to produce the calculations. Then National Center for Children and Poverty, they have the Family Resource Simulator. And this Family Resource Simulator tool references the rules from the policy rules database technical manual and Excel files, but it doesn't use the R code directly, right? Instead, they write their own implementation, different programming language, which is totally fine, right? But again, sort of we converge the same sort of set of rules to use in Atlanta Fed tools and in the NCCP tools, which I think is very important. Then there is Martha Bryan Center in Tennessee. They developed the transitional benefits calculator. And the calculator uses the policy rules database R code at the back end to estimate the value of the benefits. And then Mitra, they have the Ccash tool, I think, that is still under development, but they also use a PRD in the back end, or at least as they're developing and they're using it right now.
What's the Ccash app for?
Well, last time I talked to them, it was I think they were applying the policy rules database. It's like a micro simulation tool, sort of, that applies PRD to SEEP, the share of income program participations, to estimate some stuff. But it was under the progress. I don't want to talk much about that.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Yeah. Now, the second important application of the PRD is research and policy analysis. My colleagues and I have been using PRD to explore, a number of different research questions, and also wrote, multiple academic research papers. For example, how did the ACA affect labor supply? What is the impact of high marginal tax rates on economic mobility? Right, that's this last bullet point. So we can apply the policy rules database to the CPS, to the monthly core inflation survey, to do this sort of analysis with PRD to explore the effect of pre-kindergarten on the labor supply of mothers, and sort of different related stuff, right? So essentially, the set of questions we can explore with the PRD is how does the structure of the US fiscal system affect sort of the outcome, right? The particular labor supply, but also some other outcomes as well. And Atlanta Fed also uses PRD to conduct say policy analysis and policy simulations, right? In partnership with some state and local governments and with different nonprofit institutions. So for example, we use PRD to simulate the policy changes to the structure of the CCDF, the Child Care Subsidy Program in Florida. And then also we did similar analysis in Illinois, right? So we proposed some alternative ways to restructure the subsidy, to remove this benefits cliffs and very high effective marginal tax rates. We're also using PRD to simulate the state level ATC expansions, for example, and just to give you an example, right, what type of analysis can be done using the PRD, but we did also much more. All right, so I think I kind of gave you an overview of the PRD, of the repository, and of what sort of stuff can be done with the PRD. I think I can stop here to see if you have any questions. And so you have a link to the PRD repository, and my email is on the slide. So if you're interested in, if you want to learn more about PRD, or if you want to sort of contribute to the PRD more formally in improving this product, feel free to reach out to me. We can talk about that. All right. Thank you.
Elias, this has been
could
great.
you share the slides? I'd love to poke around some of those materials you link there.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know, Jason, can I just send you the slides and then you can distribute it?
Sounds great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Elias, I did have a question in terms of how have you thought about structuring these data? Because there's a lot of different, right? Some policies may use AGI, some might use a measure of earned income or other income measures. There are so many different parameters. How have you thought about kind of capturing all of these in a way? Obviously, you've done it, but what have been some of the challenges in capturing all these different parameters of the various tax and benefit policies?
Yeah, well, there is no easy answer. I guess you just really need to go and like read in all the, well, that's what NCCP was doing, actually. That's the important contribution of the National Center of Children Empowered, to write the research all these rules and then put everything together for us in the form of the technical manual and the Excel files, right? And I mean, this is not easy, just collect all the information. But your question was specifically about the countable income, or more generally about the parameters?
Well, just more generally, just poking around a little bit, you might have different, like I said, different income that is the countable income for the relevant policy. You may have one, phase out threshold. You might have multiple.
Oh, yeah.
Just in thinking about this project, right? It's not there's not a easily countable number of parameters.
You can exactly. So you can create like one single Excel file with the same structure for all programs. So if you like play around with Excel files, you'll see the structure of the Excel files is very similar, right? There is stuff sort of merge on. There is variation parameters by some characteristics. Again, depends on the program. Sometimes it's by like number of kids, sometimes it's by family size, sometimes it's by tax filing status, right? But there is some variation level, and then there's a set of parameters, right? So that's the structure, which is similar across all programs, but it's still like, each program has its own set of parameters. Like it simplifies the, I guess, interpretation, right? And ability to read the rules. You just open Excel files and they're all structured the same way, but you still need to sort of reference PRD technical manual. US system is very complicated. You can't unfortunately come up with something easier than that.
Elias, I have a question. I was looking through your state, let's see, what is it? It's the state income tax Excel file. And I see all 50 states, 5 different filing statuses, but the rules for calculating tax liability seem like they kind of have the rate at which a certain definition of income is tax, but having gone through some of those state tax forms, how much of those did you cover? It looks like some of the credits and refunds are not part of these state parameters.
Yeah, the state state income taxes right now, I think it's just the rates, like, yeah, no, we have not gone very deep into that in a state specific, in the state income assets. Yeah, well, something that we also sort of like, need to improve this time. It kind of works for now for our simulations, but if you want to go into deeper, then it requires more work for sure.
I see.
Yeah.
And Elias, there's a question in the chat from Jason Morris. It looks like a good one. What tools would you like to have had for quality assurance in representing rules that you didn't have?
Can you elaborate on the question? Sorry, I guess I'm not fully.
I guess I had a related one. I don't know if this is totally touching on the other Jasons, but thinking about in terms of like testing for just accuracy of your logic, or even accuracy of like writing down the rules for these programs. Was there any kind of type of testing you've done, for instance, validating against somebody else's benefits calculator, or writing specific unit tests for some of those functions in the R code to compute the benefits?
Right, that's something I'm working on right now. In terms of the quality checks, we did, for example, for SSI and SSDI, we did comparison with some other calculators that are available out there. That's NCCP was doing that. And then we also always, making sure that our calculations and NCCP's calculations are aligned fully, right? Although we're using different code bases, right? We produce the same set of calculations. And then now we're sort of exploring possibility of using our sort of capitalizing on our connections with state and local governments to sort of to review, like to do the quality check of our rules, right? So the most recent one was the state of Tennessee. They have some experts in SSI and SSDI, and they did some testing for us and returned some comments, right? And sort of that, but it's not like formalized yet in terms of the ideally would like to create some formal relationship, right? Like, some test set, right? I think Max and I were talking about that as well. It'd be great to have like a test set for all programs, right? That we all can test our calculators against. So that's sort of ongoing work towards it. Yeah. And
I put in the chat a link to that benefits cliff calculator, because that's it looks like it's an R Shiny app that you've built it with, and just a really nice presentation. I love I'm looking at a screen now with two figures. The first one, shows the amounts of public assistance for different programs. And I love the shaded bar chart where you can see certain programs phasing out and others phasing in. That's really a slick application of what you're doing here.
Yeah, Devin, thanks for putting that in the chat. It's actually in my slide, a link to the PRD dashboard as well. And it's essentially the PRD repository, right? But kind of wrapped up in this our Shiny user interface, right? So if you don't want to do calculations yourself, you can just, some people, they're not programmers, but they're interested in the system, in the structure of the system, right? You can just use this tool to understand, visualize the structure of the US fiscal system. So yeah, thanks for putting it in the chat.
All right, Jason Morris followed up the question about kind of quality assurance, just wondering if there's good ways for non-programmers to kind of contribute. I guess the GitHub repository is one, and probably your open issues are open there. If people find something to, an error, for instance, in one of the tables, I guess that would be a good way to get in touch with you all.
That is true. Yes, we also have our sort of like email, right? And in the tools you write, like if you have any questions or any comments, if you spot any errors, you can email us. And it's in all our tools. We have like a link to the email that you can send. But that's, yeah, we might want to create something more like easy to use for people. Like, yeah, if you have any suggestions or want to contribute, then yeah, reach out to us.
And now another question is with respect to, I like the test YAML file where somebody could simulate like a particular record and look at these benefits. And that's nice for kind of isolating kind of how the calculations are done. Is there anything that you've kind of set up for a potential use case where somebody has a larger data set? Maybe they have a specific survey like the current population survey, and they want to be able to, compute these benefits or records in that data set. Does the technical documentation cover that, or how would one get started there?
Not yet. We connected PRD to 4 data sets, and the plan is also to open source this piece as well. And 4 data sets: it's American Community Survey, CPS ASAC, monthly CPS, and SEEP. Right, so these 4 data sets, and we're working on the PSAD, but that's, I don't think it's going to happen. It's too difficult. But yeah, so they're connected, and the plan is, well, we need to do a little bit more work on that, but at least these 4 sort of like pieces of the code that connect PRD to the 4 data sets, you want to make them open source as well. Yeah. But for now, what is open source is only these hypothetical families you can construct. But no one prevents you from like applying these functions to any data set. You just need to do more work. We don't have documentation.
All right. Any other questions from the audience? All right, Elias, thank you so much. This is a great tool. Really, a lot of work you put into this, and I'm impressed to see all the use cases already through academic research, policy work at the Fed, and then other work through think tanks and so on, utilizing this calculator already. And I'm sure it'll be more heavily utilized in the future too. Thanks for sharing it with us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting. It's great.
All right, take care, Elias. Bye.
Thank you.